Too black, too strong.
Yo, Chuck, these honey drippers are still front on us. Show them that we can do this, cause we always do this. Yeah, boy!
Hello and welcome to OLT 322, African American Literature. This is lecture 13 on Amiri Baraka. We're going to talk a little bit about Amiri Baraka, and then we're going to talk about his play The Dutchman, in particular the themes of identity and violence. Amiri Baraka represents the next step in the search for an identity for African Americans. In fact, he was born Leroy Jones, but later in 1968, following the ideas of Malcolm X, he changed his name to Amiri Baraka, and later on he made it to Kiswahili version Amiri to associate himself more closely with Africans. Malcolm X also went through a number of evolutions in his lifetime, and he's worth studying in depth. In fact, I learned the value of self-identification and effort and the value of self-transformation. At Howard University, Amiri Baraka was disgusted by what he thought of as black students and black teachers assimilating into white society. He was also unhappy with the black middle class for its tendency to assimilate. In fact, he was a very strong nationalist, and like other separatists, he believed that blacks should secede, should withdraw from the United States government and create their own nation. This was seen as the only way that blacks could feel safe and whole. He created the Black Repertory Arts Theater and School, and it was to be run by blacks, and the art and drama created by blacks and for blacks, about blacks, and no whites involved in the experience, because it was believed that this was the only way that they could reach a true, authentic expression of their own identity and culture. This is a little bit like Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, who goes into a cave to find his identity, to discover himself. For Baraka, the role of the writer is not only to entertain, but also to serve a social and political role. While he was criticized for sexism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, and racism, he also won many honors and awards, which shows that his work was provocative, thought-provoking, and also thus memorable. Identity and black manhood are the main subjects of the play The Dutchman. Clay, the main character, is a person who has tried to assimilate into white society, and he has tried to escape being black. And even though from a poor origin, he tries to act like he's in the black middle class. When he's pushed through anger to discover his black self, he dies for defying the white world. As such, Baraka has created a character who not only represents the survival tactics of Jim Crow wisdom, but also criticizes them for the resulting loss of identity and manhood. He also shows the consequences of defying that Jim Crow wisdom. As we discussed in Baldwin's Blues for Mr. Charlie, Lula, the white female character, represents the white power structure and racial purity, and also is an excuse for the oppression of black men. She is shown as a temptress, and she tempts Clay to acknowledge his true self. Lula represents the full scope of white racism in its way of making blacks invisible through stereotypes and the refusal to see their humanity, to see them for they really are. And she expects Clay to behave according to those stereotypes. And when he refuses, he insults her, and so she kills him. By pretending to be middle class, Clay is trying to survive and to succeed, but he loses control over his identity in this way. And like Richard in Blues for Mr. Charlie, his strategy only makes him a victim of white power. Instead of tricking the way the clever rabbit would do, he ends up tricking himself and being the victim of his own trick. Clay only reacts to Lula's provocation when she says he's afraid of whites, and this truth wakes him up, and he angrily defends himself. In this moment, he's on his way to his true self, but instead of reaching what could be the final and ultimate expression of that self, which probably will result in the killing of Lula in this standing up and fighting back, he instead complains about the escapism of black arts and refuses to adopt their attitude of escapism. He's just going to be himself, and even if he's a fool, let him be a fool. In the end, he returns to his former self, which was confused because he was pretending to be something he wasn't. Along the way, however, he learns three things. The first is that no matter how many ways he hides his identity, he's still just going to be a black man for the white people. Two, no matter how much education or money, a white person can still make him return to that kowtowing Jim Crow wisdom strategy. Three, he learns that he can't show his dignity and identity and live. If he stands up for himself, he's going to die. Instead of remaining the object of white amusement, he makes them hate him, and thus they kill him. The theme of violence, as with Douglas and Wright, can be used for self-destruction as well as destruction. Lula represents all the years of violent oppression against blacks, as well as all the deaths of black men due to white women. Clay's violence awakens his self-consciousness, his true identity. But he doesn't continue because destructive violence to him is not progressive. This makes him vulnerable, and as a result, Lula kills him in his moment of vulnerability. The other passengers, black and white, do nothing when she kills him, and this shows the complicity of all in the maintenance of the oppressive system. People who are too afraid to stand up, because if you stand up, you get chopped down, don't you? And one by one is what people usually do, and they get cut down instead of banding together as a group and standing up. You can knock down one man, but you can't knock down 10, 50, 100, 1,000, 1 million. The play seems to be calling for or hinting at a race war. In the 60s, when the play was written, these kinds of ideas were flying around as a big race war is coming. It was called Helter Skelter by Manson, who was a serial killer. What would he know, right? Here we see the quest for identity has gone back towards the collective side, a group identity to be forged, but out of the view of white oppression. It's in isolation, as with the black repertory theater. This separating off and defining oneself, and perhaps before then, rejoining the larger group. This was lecture 13 on Amiri Baraka. Stay tuned for the final lecture. Lecture 14. Oh no, it's going to be over soon. Lecture 14, where we discuss women writers.
Yeah, I'm telling you. Hey, yo, Griff.